Sarah Anderson stood just outside the glass doors of Myri Tech, her heart beating fast as she adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. One of the biggest tech companies in Korea. I really made it, she thought. The building was sleek and imposing, all steel and glass, towering above the busy Seoul street. For a moment, she remembered her parents, how proud they would have been to see her here. The thought steadied her and she stepped inside. HR moved quickly. Papers were signed, rules explained, badges issued. Sarah listened, carefully nodding, absorbing everything. When they finally led her into a large conference room. For introductions, she felt a flutter of nerves but nothing she couldn't handle. Several executives were already seated. At the head of the table sat a man whose presence seemed to command the entire room. Without effort. Bong Min-jae. Sarah had seen his face before on magazine covers, business journals, online interviews. Seeing him in person was different. He was calm, unreadable, dressed simply yet expensively. His gaze was lowered to a tablet, his attention seemingly elsewhere. "Sir," the HR manager said respectfully, "this is Sarah Anderson. She'll be joining us as an intern. In the software development unit." Sarah bowed politely. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Min-jae looked up. The room seemed to pause. He hadn't planned to pay attention. Interns were routine. Faces blurred together after years of leadership. But the moment his eyes met hers, something unexpected stirred sharp and disorienting. She wasn't trying to impress him. There was no nervous smile, no exaggerated respect. Just quiet confidence and steady eyes. For a fraction of a second he forgot where he was. "Welcome," he said finally, his voice controlled. Sarah nodded and followed HR out, unaware that she had just unsettled a man who prided himself on never being moved. Min-jae watched her leave. An intern, he told himself. Yet his gaze lingered long after the door closed. By the time Sarah got home that evening, her feet ached and her head buzzed with new information. Aunt Mia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. "You're home," Mia said, turning with a warm smile. "First day, how was it?" Sarah dropped her bag and exhaled deeply. "Overwhelming," she admitted, sinking onto a chair. "But exciting." Mia placed a plate in front of her. "Tell me everything." "The building is huge. Everyone moves so fast," Sarah said between bites. "And the people. They're intimidating. In a good way." Mia laughed softly. "That's how big places are. Did you meet anyone important?" Sarah hesitated briefly, then shrugged. "Just the executives during the introduction. They're impressive." "Did you feel out of place?" Mia asked gently. Sarah shook her head. "No. Nervous, yes, but I earned this. I belong there." Mia smiled proudly, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "That's the spirit." Later that night, as Sarah lay in bed, she replayed the day in her mind. The faces, the building, the brief moment when one particular pair of eyes had met hers. She pushed the thought away. Tomorrow will be busy. Back across the city, Bong Min-jae stood alone in his office, staring out at the skyline. For reasons he could not explain, the calm of his day felt disturbed. And it had begun with an intern. Sarah's second day at Myri Tech began before sunrise. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, smoothing down her blouse, reminding herself to breathe. The first days were always the hardest. Today she told herself it would be better. Less nerves, more confidence. By the time she arrived at the office, the building was already alive with motion. Screens glowed. Voices murmured, coffee machines hissed softly. Sarah took her seat in the intern section, greeting the other interns politely. Most of them were Korean graduates fresh out of university. Few smiled back warmly, others eyed her with mild curiosity. She didn't mind. She focused on work. Her first assignment was simple: reviewing code, documenting bugs, assisting senior developers when needed. Sarah worked quietly but efficiently, fingers flying across the keyboard, her brow creased in concentration. She asked questions when necessary, listened carefully to explanations, and took notes. More than once, a senior engineer paused beside her desk. "You studied here?" one of them asked, impressed. "Yes," Sarah replied with a small smile. "Computer engineering. Your Korean is very good." "Thank you." From the glass walls of an upper-floor office, Bong Min-jae looked down. He hadn't intended to stop there. He had meetings lined up, calls waiting. Yet somehow his steps slowed near the railing that overlooked the development floor. His eyes found her without effort. She was different from the others, calmer, more focused. Not eager to be noticed. Not trying to stand out. And yet she did. effortlessly. A man leaned over her desk, pointing at her screen. She smiled faintly, nodding as she listened. Something sharp flickered through Min-jae. He frowned, annoyed with himself, and turned away. You're distracted, he thought. Get back to work. Sarah, unaware of the silent scrutiny, spent the rest of the day buried in tasks. By late afternoon, her eyes were tired, her shoulders sore, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing she was doing well. As she packed up to leave, one of the interns waved at her. Dinner with us? Sarah hesitated, then smiled apologetically. Maybe another time. She wanted to get home. To breathe. To tell her aunt about the small victories. That evening, Mia listened as Sarah spoke animatedly about her assignments, her co-workers, the rhythm of the office. I think I'll learn a lot there, Sarah said, hope brightening her eyes. Mia nodded. That's all you need, an opportunity and the courage to grow. Sarah smiled, but later, alone in her room, her thoughts drifted back to the building. To the strange feeling of being watched, not in fear but in awareness. She dismissed it as imagination. Across the city, Bong Min-jae reviewed reports late into the night. Yet between lines of data and projections, one image kept intruding, long wavy hair bent over a laptop, a soft smile not meant for him. He shut his laptop abruptly. This is ridiculous, he muttered. But deep down he knew one thing with certainty. The intern named Sarah Anderson was no longer invisible. Sarah began to notice it on the third day. At first it was nothing more than a feeling, subtle, fleeting. The kind that made the hairs on the back of her neck rise for no clear reason. She would look up from her screen expecting to catch someone staring, only to find nothing unusual, nothing she could prove. Still, the feeling followed her. In meetings she sensed it. In the open workspace she felt it strongest, an invisible weight that made her straighten unconsciously, adjust her posture, refocus her attention. She told herself it was nerves. Yet when she glanced toward the glass offices above, her heart skipped for reasons she couldn't name. Bong Min-jae told himself he was simply observing. As the founder of MyReTech, it was his job to know his people, to notice patterns, talent, inefficiencies. That was the excuse he repeated in his mind as his gaze drifted, unbidden, to the intern section. Sarah Anderson sat there again, sleeves rolled up slightly, hair falling forward as she worked. Focused, serious, beautiful. The word startled him. He looked away immediately, jaw tightening. Yet the next time she laughed softly at something a coworker said, his eyes returned to her. Without permission. The sound, light, unguarded, did something unsettling to him. Later that afternoon, Sarah stood by the coffee machine, waiting patiently as it hummed. It sensed movement behind her and turned. Their eyes met. Time slowed. Min-jae hadn't meant to stop there. He hadn't even realized he'd followed the familiar pull until he was standing a few feet away. Up close, he noticed details he hadn't from afar, the faint concentration line between her brows, the warmth in her eyes. Good afternoon, she said politely, bowing slightly. Her voice was calm, unassuming. Good afternoon, he replied, his tone neutral. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the machine beeped. Sarah reached for her cup, fingers brushing the counter, and for a split second, Min-jae wondered what it would feel like to reach for her instead. The thought jolted him. He stepped back, giving a short nod before walking away. Sarah watched him go, her heart beating faster than it should have. Why does he look at me like that? She wondered. Not with warmth. Not with anger. But with something intense, something unreadable. That evening she tried to focus on a drama episode with her aunt, but her mind drifted. Mia noticed. You're far away. Sarah hesitated. Auntie, have you ever felt like someone was watching you but you couldn't explain why? Mia raised an eyebrow. At work. Sarah nodded slowly. Mia studied her face, then smiled faintly. Sometimes attention doesn't announce itself. It waits. Sarah laughed nervously. You make it sound ominous. Or important, Mia replied gently. Later, alone in his office, Bong Min-jae stood before the mirror, loosening his tie. Why did her eyes follow him after he turned away? Why did he feel unsettled, like he'd crossed an invisible line without taking a step? He had built an empire on discipline and control. And yet, a single intern had begun to unravel the calm he had perfected. He didn't know what it meant. But one thing was clear. Their eyes had met. And neither of them had walked away untouched. Bong Min-jae had always believed anger was a useful thing. Anger sharpened focus. Anger demanded discipline. Anger could be controlled. Until Sarah Anderson. It started subtly. A senior developer paused by her desk one morning, leaning casually against the partition as he explained something on her screen. Sarah listened attentively, nodding, then smiled, small and polite but genuine. Min-jae saw it from across the floor. His jaw tightened. He didn't know why the sight irritated him. The man wasn't touching her. He wasn't inappropriate. Yet the longer he stood there, the heavier Min-jae's chest felt. Why is he still there? Min-jae muttered under his breath. He turned away abruptly, irritation simmering. Later that day, during a walkthrough of the development floor, Min-jae passed close enough to hear laughter. Sarah again, this time with another intern. Her smile was brighter, freer. Something inside him snapped. "Focus," he said coldly, stopping in his tracks. The laughter died instantly. Everyone straightened, eyes dropping to their screens. Sarah blinked, startled. "Yes, sir," she said softly, confusion flickering across her face. Min-jae didn't look at her as he walked away, but his pulse was racing. Why does it bother me? He asked himself angrily. She's allowed to smile. And yet, every time she did, every time another man earned it, his temper flared without warning. Sarah noticed the change before she understood it. The atmosphere around her felt tighter. Conversations around her desk shortened when Min-jae was nearby. Men who had been friendly suddenly became formal, distant. Once, when a coworker offered to help her carry files, Min-jae's sharp glance made the man retreat instantly. That evening, Sarah sat across from Aunt Mia, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "Something's wrong," Mia said, watching her closely. Sarah sighed. "I think I'm imagining things, but people are acting strange around me at work." "In what way?" "They stop talking when certain people walk by," Sarah said slowly. "And sometimes it feels like I've done something wrong just by being friendly." Mia leaned back thoughtfully. "Have you changed how you act?" "No." "Then someone else has," Mia replied quietly. Back at Myritech, Min-jae stood in his office, hands braced on the desk. He replayed the image of her smile, again and again, each time it wasn't meant for him. That realization struck him hard. "Meh," he scoffed inwardly. "Since when do I want anyone's attention?" But the truth was unavoidable now. He didn't like sharing her presence. Didn't like other men seeing her warmth. Didn't like the way she belonged nowhere near his world, and yet had begun to dominate his thoughts. This was no longer a distraction. It was possession without permission. And Bong Min-jae had never been more dangerous than when he wanted something he couldn't. Sarah noticed the rules before anyone explained them. They weren't written. They weren't announced. But they were there, hovering, unspoken, heavy. Conversations at her desk became brief and strictly professional. Male colleagues who once lingered now kept their distance. Even casual smiles were replaced with careful nods whenever Bong Min-jae was nearby. At first, Sarah blamed herself. Maybe I'm too friendly, she thought. Maybe I'm not fitting in the way I should. So she adjusted. She spoke less, smiled less, kept her head down and focused on her work. Yet the pressure didn't ease. One afternoon, she was asked to deliver documents to the executive floor. As she stepped into the elevator, a familiar presence followed her in. The doors closed. Silence filled the space. Min-jae stood beside her, tall and immaculately composed, eyes forward. The air felt suddenly thinner. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She clasped the file tighter. Neither of them spoke. Halfway up, the elevator slowed briefly. The lights flickered. Sarah inhaled sharply before she could stop herself. Min-jae turned his head. "Are you uncomfortable?" he asked, his voice calm but probing. "No," she replied quickly, then steadied herself. "I'm fine." He studied her for a moment longer than necessary, his gaze searching her face as if looking for something he couldn't name. "Good," he said finally, turning away. The doors opened moments later and Sarah stepped out, unaware of the tension she left behind. Min-jae remained inside, fists clenched at his sides. Why did her nearness affect him so deeply? Why did the thought of someone else standing this close to her ignite something dark inside? That evening, Sarah returned home quieter than usual. Mia noticed immediately. "You're carrying something heavy," she said gently. Sarah hesitated, then confessed, "I feel like I'm walking on invisible lines at work. Like one wrong step and everything will fall apart." Mia reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Sometimes boundaries are created not to protect us but to protect the ones who set them." Sarah frowned. "From what?" Mia's eyes softened. "From feelings they're not ready to face." Across the city, Bong Min-jae stared at his reflection in the darkened glass of his office. He had spent years mastering restraint. Yet now, every smile Sarah didn't give him, every glance she offered another man felt like a challenge to that restraint. He had drawn boundaries around her without her consent. And the most dangerous truth of all? He wasn't sure he wanted to let them go. Bong Min-jae's patience thinned by the hour. It was no longer just irritation. It was heat, coiled tight in his chest, waiting for an excuse. The excuse came mid-morning. Sarah stood beside her desk, reviewing something on her tablet while one of the senior engineers hovered too close. The man smiled, too easily, too warmly, his eyes lingering on her face instead of the screen. Min-jae saw it. He didn't just see interest. He saw intent. The man laughed at something Sarah said, his expression openly smitten, admiration written plainly across his face. That was enough. Do you have nothing better to do? The voice cut through the floor like a blade. Everyone froze. Min-jae stood a few steps away, his expression dark, eyes locked on the engineer. Sir? The man stammered, straightening immediately. This is a workplace, not a social lounge, Min-jae continued coldly. If your tasks are finished, submit your report. If not, get back to work. I was just. Do not explain yourself, Min-jae snapped. You're paid to think, not flirt. The color drained from the man's face. Yes, sir. He retreated instantly. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, shock flickering across her face. She hadn't done anything wrong, yet she felt exposed as if a spotlight had been turned on her without warning. Min-jae didn't look at her. He turned and walked away, anger radiating off him in sharp waves. But even as he left, his hands trembled slightly at his sides. What am I doing? He thought, jaw clenched. Yet the image of that man's eyes on Sarah replayed again and again in his mind, fueling the fire, rather than extinguishing it. Sarah slowly sank into her chair, heart pounding. Around her, co-workers avoided her gaze. No one spoke. For the rest of the day, she worked in silence, confusion weighing heavily on her chest. That evening, she told Aunt Mia everything, carefully, hesitantly. I feel like I'm the problem, Sarah admitted. Like his anger follows me. Mia's expression hardened for the first time. You are not the problem, she said firmly. But someone at that office is losing control. And across the city, Bong Min-jae stood alone in his office long after everyone had left, staring at the empty development floor. His anger still burned. Not at the man, but at himself. The weekend came but rest did not. Bong Min-jae stood alone in his penthouse. The city stretched endlessly beneath the glass walls. Seoul glittered at night, alive, loud, tempting, but none of it reached him. His jacket lay abandoned on the couch, his tie loosened, a half-finished glass of whiskey untouched on the counter. Sarah Anderson's face rose unbidden in his mind. The way she listened. The way she smiled without trying. The way her presence lingered long after she left the room. Ridiculous, he muttered. She was an intern. Temporary. Insignificant in the grand design of his life. He needed to get her out of his head. Min-jae had never lacked options. One call was all it took. An actress, beautiful, famous, eager. Agreed instantly. By evening, they were seated in a private room of an exclusive restaurant, the kind that guaranteed discretion. She laughed brightly, touching his arm as she spoke about her latest project, her upcoming shoot, the pressures of fame. She was stunning. Perfect even, and he felt nothing. His gaze drifted, not to her but to the city beyond the window. His responses were polite, distant. He nodded at the right moments, offered smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. Are you tired? She asked finally, studying him. No, he replied calmly. Just distracted. She leaned closer. Maybe I can help with that. But even then, especially then, his mind betrayed him. Sarah wouldn't laugh like this. Sarah wouldn't try this hard. Sarah wouldn't feel so empty. Min-jae pushed his chair back slightly. I'll have my driver take you home. Confusion flickered across the actress's face. Already? Yes. He paid the bill, apologized without emotion and left. Back in his skyscraper, silence greeted him like an old companion. Min-jae loosened his cuffs and walked to the window once more, hands in his pockets. The distraction had failed. Worse, it had made the truth clearer. No woman he chose could erase the one he hadn't. Somewhere across the city, Sarah spent her weekend quietly, laundry, grocery shopping with her aunt, video calls with friends, unaware that she occupied the thoughts of a man who had everything, and yet felt unsettled by a presence he couldn't touch. Min-jae closed his eyes. Monday was coming. And with it her. Monday morning arrived with ruthless precision. Bong Min-jae barely slept. By the time he stepped into MyReTech's headquarters, his expression was calm, unreadable, perfectly controlled. No one would have guessed his weekend had been spent battling thoughts of an intern he had no right to think about. The office stirred the moment he arrived. Executives straightened. Assistants lowered their voices. The familiar rhythm of fear and respect followed him down the corridor. And then he saw her. Sarah sat at her desk, hair pulled back loosely, eyes focused on her screen. She looked rested, peaceful, as if the weekend had given her something he lacked. The sight unsettled him more than he expected. For a brief moment her gaze lifted. Their eyes met. Sarah's breath hitched not from fear, but from the strange awareness that always seemed to bloom when he was near. She looked away first, fingers tightening around her mouse. Min-jae forced himself to keep walking. Focus. But throughout the morning his attention strayed. Every time a man paused near her desk, his patience thinned. Every soft smile she gave felt like a personal provocation. By noon his restraint was fraying. "Send the intern up," he said suddenly to his assistant. The words left his mouth before he fully examined them. "Yes, sir," she replied immediately. Minutes later, Sarah stood outside the executive office, nerves fluttering in her stomach. "Why does he want to see me?" She knocked lightly. "Come in." The office was vast and quiet. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, illuminating the man behind the desk, composed, powerful, unreadable. "You asked to see me, sir?" Min-jae studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "Yes," he said finally. "Sit." Sarah obeyed, back straight, hands folded in her lap. He opened a file, one he already knew by heart. "Your performance has been noticeable," he said carefully. Her eyes widened slightly. "Thank you, sir." The sincerity in her voice made something tighten in his chest. "This company demands professionalism," he continued. "Discipline. Focus." "I understand," she replied softly. Their eyes met again. This time neither of them looked away. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them, charged, fragile, dangerous. Min-jae was the first to break the moment. He closed the file. "That's all," he said quietly. "You may go." Sarah stood, bowing politely, confusion clouding her expression as she left. Min-jae leaned back in his chair once the door closed. The distraction hadn't worked. The weekend hadn't helped. And now the lines he'd drawn were trembling. Because Monday had confirmed one undeniable truth. Sarah Anderson wasn't leaving his mind anytime soon. The office buzzed with excitement. Whispers floated from desk to desk, punctuated by laughter and the clatter of keyboards. The quarterly corporate retreat had been announced, an exclusive weekend at one of MyReTech's luxury resorts, complete with team-building exercises, networking dinners, and high-profile presentations. For many employees, it was a chance to see the glamorous side of the company they worked for, a perk few could resist. Sarah overheard snippets of conversation as she filed documents. "Can you believe it's at the CEO's private resort?" one intern whispered. "Everyone will be there," another added. "Even the board members and, well, him." Sarah felt a small flutter of nerves and excitement. She had never been to a corporate retreat of this scale, and the thought of traveling somewhere beautiful for work made her pulse quicken. That evening she returned home, exhausted but eager to share the news with her aunt. "Mia, guess what?" Sarah called as she kicked off her shoes. Her aunt looked up from the kitchen counter, wiping her hands on a tea towel. "What is it, Sarah?" "The company is having a corporate retreat this weekend," she said, practically bouncing. "It's at one of the boss's private resorts. Can you imagine?" Mia raised her eyebrows, smiling warmly. "A resort? That sounds fancy." "Fancy doesn't even begin to describe it," Sarah said, settling at the kitchen table. "Everyone's talking about it. They're sending teams and," she paused, her voice dropping slightly, "he'll be there too." Mia studied her niece carefully. "And how does that make you feel?" Sarah laughed nervously. "Excited, I guess, and a little nervous. I've never been to something like this before. I just hope I don't mess anything up." "You'll be fine," Mia reassured her. "You've been doing well. Just enjoy yourself." Sarah nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the office, to the man whose presence had started to feel impossible to ignore. "He'll be there too," she thought, feeling a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Meanwhile, across the city, Bong Min-jae reviewed the retreat schedule in his penthouse, scanning lists of attendees and activities. Everything was planned meticulously, perfectly. Yet, even he felt a stir of anticipation he hadn't expected. She'll be there, he thought, and the thought made his chest tighten. The resort shimmered like a jewel under the afternoon sun. Palm trees swayed lazily in the warm breeze, and the glass-fronted villas reflected the sparkling ocean beyond. Myritech. Employees poured in, laughter and chatter filling the air, everyone eager to begin the weekend. Sarah arrived with her team, her heart beating faster than usual. This was nothing like the office, bright, open, full of movement, full of freedom. For a moment, she let herself relax, savoring the rare chance to step outside her usual routine. Her excitement, however, was quickly interrupted. "Attention everyone," an assistant's voice called over a portable microphone. "The CEO has arrived." Heads turned. Conversations died down. Even the waves of the ocean seemed to fade into the background as a sleek black car rolled up the driveway. Bong Min-jae stepped out, dressed in a tailored dark suit, presence sharp, commanding. But he wasn't alone. A woman followed closely at his side, tall, stunning, with hair that caught the sunlight and a dress that left no doubt she was used to attention. Her smile was bright, practiced, effortless. The murmurs among the staff rippled instantly. "Who's she?" someone whispered. "Actress, I think," another replied. Sarah froze mid-step. Her chest tightened. She had imagined many scenarios in her head about seeing him outside the office, but this was different. The woman laughed lightly at something Bong said, brushing against his arm casually. She was beautiful, yes, but in a way that made Sarah's stomach twist with something she didn't want to name. Bong Min-jae's eyes scanned the crowd. When they landed on Sarah for a fleeting moment, his gaze sharpened. The heat she had already come to feel in his attention intensified. Sarah, sensing his stare, looked away quickly, heart hammering. "Why does it feel like he's mad at me, already?" The CEO walked ahead of his team, the woman gracefully at his side. He nodded politely to a few employees, but the weight in his gaze never fully left Sarah's direction. She could feel it like an electric current, invisible but undeniable. As they reached the central terrace, the retreat coordinator began outlining the weekend's events, but Sarah could barely focus. Every time Bong glanced her way, the woman at his side, smiling, laughing, leaning closer to him, made something inside Min-jae flare, and she sensed it. Even from a distance, the tension was palpable. Sarah took a deep breath and tried to push the thought away. This is just a retreat. Just work. Focus. But Min-jae had already noticed something, and for the first time in years he realized that not even a weekend distraction could keep Sarah Anderson from lingering in his mind. And the woman at his side was doing nothing to ease the growing storm. The resort's dining hall was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto the ocean, the soft glow of lanterns reflecting off polished wood and glass. The gentle hum of waves mixed with quiet chatter, clinking cutlery and soft laughter. Sarah took her seat with her team, trying to calm her nerves. She hadn't anticipated how formal the first dinner would feel, or how much attention she would feel without understanding why. And then she saw him. Bong Min-jae entered with the woman from earlier. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the waiter seemed to falter under the weight of his presence. The woman at his side smiled at staff, at colleagues, but every time Min-jae's gaze flicked across the room, it landed on Sarah. She tried to focus on her plate, her team, anything but him. But it was impossible. Halfway through the dinner, one of the junior employees, a cheerful young man from another department, leaned over to share a joke. Sarah smiled politely, caught off guard by his warmth. Min-jae noticed instantly. His jaw tightened. Fingers drummed lightly on the table beside him, almost imperceptible but enough for anyone paying attention to see. The woman at his side laughed at something he said, leaning closer, but he barely noticed her. His attention had narrowed, laser-focused. Why does she smile at him? He thought, sharp and burning inside. She's mine to watch, and yet. He leaned back slightly, trying to control the irritation threatening to flare. Sarah, oblivious to the storm she had just stirred, excused herself politely after dinner to freshen. Her mind was buzzing, not from work but from the strange intensity of being noticed, watched and measured. When she returned, the dining hall had quieted, some employees stepping outside to enjoy the terrace. Min-jae's table remained quiet, the woman beside him scrolling through her phone. And then he spoke, just enough for her to hear, low and controlled, yet sharp. Don't get distracted. Sarah paused mid-step, heart hammering. She looked up, he was watching her, calm, unreadable, but every inch of his body radiated control, and something more. Something she couldn't place. She nodded subtly, trying not to betray the sudden awareness of her own pulse. Min-jae returned his gaze to the city lights outside the windows, but the tension in the room lingered long after she sat down. The woman beside him noticed nothing, laughing at a message on her phone, while Min-jae's eyes remained fixed quietly on the intern across the room. It was only the beginning. The weekend had promised relaxation, team building, and fun, but already Sarah Anderson had become something dangerous, even for Bong Min-jae, who had always thought himself untouchable. The morning sun spilled over the resort, painting the terrace in soft gold. The air was warm, the waves gentle, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in Bong Min-jae's mind. The day's retreat activities were underway: team exercises, brainstorming sessions, and informal competitions designed to break the ice. Sarah moved with her group, trying to focus, to enjoy the experience, but she felt his gaze following her relentlessly. And then it happened. A sudden scheduling mix-up left her alone near the resort's private garden, maps in her hand, trying to locate the next activity site. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up. It was him. "Sarah," he said quietly, voice calm but commanding. "I need to speak with you." Her stomach fluttered. The rest of the retreat felt distant. She nodded and followed him down a winding path lined with flowering bushes. The sounds of the group faded, replaced by the whisper of the wind and the faint lapping of waves against the shore. He stopped near a quiet fountain, the sun glinting off the water behind him. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Have I done something wrong?" Sarah asked softly, her eyes steady. There was no tremor, no accusation, just genuine concern. "I feel like maybe I upset you and I didn't mean to." The calmness in her voice, the sincerity, caught him off guard. He opened his mouth, but no words came. She took a small step closer. "I want to apologize if I've caused any trouble. I just want to do my best." The way she bowed her head slightly, her hands folded neatly in front of her, the quiet humility in her posture, it left him utterly unprepared. Why, he thought, heart thudding, does she make it so hard to stay angry? Bong Min-jae's usual composure faltered. He had never been confronted like this, not with patience, not with grace. And yet he felt something shift inside him: admiration, restraint, breaking at the edges, and an inexplicable pull toward her. He began, then stopped. His voice came out quieter than he expected, raw even. "No. You haven't done anything wrong." Sarah lifted her head, eyes meeting his. "Then why do I feel like I've upset you?" He looked away briefly, gathering himself. "You haven't. I have a tendency to overreact. Sometimes." She blinked, taking in his words, then nodded slowly. "I understand. I just wanted to be sure. Respect you, and I want to do right by you." Her calm, composed words, spoken with quiet honesty, left him in awe. He had spent the entire weekend trying to distract himself, to control his emotions, and here she was, unaware of the storm she had stirred, yet somehow soothing it with a single, sincere apology. He didn't answer for a moment, simply studying her. The sunlight fell across her face, highlighting her features, softening her expression, yet somehow making her all the more real, all the more impossible to ignore. Finally he said, voice low but steady, "You're remarkable." Sarah's lips curved in a small, polite smile. "Thank you." She turned to leave, graceful, leaving him standing alone by the fountain, mind racing, heart pounding, and entirely unprepared for the intensity of what he felt. For the first time in years, Bong Min-jae realized he wasn't in control, not of her, not of himself, and he had no idea how to regain it. The sun was dipping low over the resort, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The retreat activities for the day had ended, and most of the employees wandered the terrace, enjoying cocktails or the gentle sea breeze. Sarah walked slowly, letting herself take in the view. Her shoulders were still tense from the morning's private confrontation, and the quiet moment outside felt like a welcome reprieve. And then she felt it, footsteps approaching. "Sarah." She turned, and there he was, Bong Min-jae. The air between them seemed to tighten the moment he was near. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. But there was something in the way he looked at her that made her pulse spike. I wanted to make sure you knew where the evening session would be, he said, voice low. Almost casual, but his eyes betrayed a sharp intensity. Oh yes, she replied, glancing down at her notes. Thank you, sir. He stepped slightly closer, just enough that their shoulders almost brushed. Her heart throbbed. In an unfamiliar rhythm, rapid and insistent. She looked up quickly, and for a moment their eyes met, dark, unreadable, magnetic. As he reached to point toward the next location, his fingers lightly brushed hers. Was accidental, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a jolt straight through her chest. Oh sorry, she murmured, pulling her hand back subtly, cheeks warming. It's fine, he said, his tone clipped, though his gaze lingered longer than necessary. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. The laughter of colleagues, the clinking of glasses, even the waves of the ocean faded into the background. All she could feel was him, his proximity, the faint warmth of his hand, and the unexpected thrum of her own heartbeat. She frowned, confused. Why am I feeling this? And he, Bong Min-jae, felt it too. The unintentional closeness, the subtle electricity in the brush of her fingers, made his chest tighten. His heart throbbed in a way that had no place in his meticulously controlled life. He forced himself to step back, straightening his posture. We should join the others, he said, tone neutral. Yes, she replied softly, but her gaze kept flicking toward him. Her pulse had yet to slow, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. What is this? She wondered, confusion and curiosity mingling in a swirl she didn't understand. Bong Min-jae, walking beside her, refused to acknowledge the tightness in his chest. But the thought of her, close, unguarded, and unknowingly stirring something in him, lingered long. After the night began, neither spoke again until the group called them together, yet both were aware of the unspoken charge between them, an invisible thread neither dared to pull, yet couldn't ignore. The lounge was quiet, the dim lights casting long shadows across the polished floors. Bong Min-jae sank into one of the plush chairs, legs crossed, fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. For the first time in weeks, his mind wasn't on reports, contracts, or company growth. It was on her. Sarah Anderson. Her quiet confidence. Her effortless smile. The way she had spoken to him earlier, calm and sincere with a hint of concern. The way her presence lingered in the corners of his mind. Stubborn and insistent. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to make sense of it. He had always been in control. Always. And yet, why does she unsettle me like this? The answer was clear. He didn't just like her. He felt something far deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. Desire, fascination, and an irrational protectiveness all wrapped into one. And the woman he had brought here as a distraction, she wasn't Sarah. He stood, moving with quiet decisiveness toward the suite where his guest waited. The actress smiled when she saw him. Everything okay? She asked lightly. Yes, he replied, voice calm yet final. Pack up. My driver will take you back. Now? She asked, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Yes, he said simply. I don't need distractions tonight. The words weren't unkind, but they carried an edge that made the meaning unmistakable. She hesitated, then nodded, gathering her things. Bong watched silently, controlling the unusual storm of emotions he felt. Relief, clarity, and a strange exhilaration coursed through him. He returned to the lounge and sank back into the chair, the quiet hum of the resort surrounding him. For the first time he felt certain about something, about who he wanted and what he couldn't ignore. Sarah Anderson. And now there was no going back. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of the ocean across the resort. Lanterns glowed softly along the poolside, reflecting in the still water. Most of the retreat guests had retired, leaving the area quiet, serene, and perfect for reflection. Bong Min-jae walked down the steps to the pool terrace, seeking a moment of solitude. He stopped abruptly. There she was. Sarah Anderson, alone, gliding through the water in measured strokes, the moonlight tracing the lines of her form. He froze, not intentionally but completely unprepared. Her hair clung to her back, her shoulders strong and graceful. The water rippled over her curves, accentuating a beauty that was effortless and undeniable. For a moment, neither moved. Then Sarah noticed him, eyes wide, and instinctively reached for her robe, pulling it around herself. I didn't realize anyone was here, she stammered, cheeks flushed crimson. He raised a hand, voice calm but firm. Don't worry. I didn't come to intrude. Her heart pounded, her pulse racing, and yet there was something in his gaze, controlled, steady, not leering, that made her hesitate to move away completely. He stepped closer but kept a respectful distance, studying her silently for a heartbeat. "You should put on some light," he said softly, nodding toward the pool lights. "It's better than swimming in the dark." She nodded slowly, adjusting her robe, still flustered. "I thank you." For a few moments, silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the soft ripple of water. Then after a pause he spoke again. "Tell me about yourself," he said, voice low, curious but not demanding. Sarah blinked, surprised by the question. "About me?" "Yes," he said simply. "I know almost nothing about you beyond what I've seen at work." She hesitated, unsure where to begin, yet something about his tone, calm, interested, unthreatening, made her feel safe enough to speak. "Well, I studied here in Korea," she began, her voice soft, "and I've been living with my aunt since my parents passed. She's everything to me. She raised me, guided me. I guess I've been trying to make a life here on my own, but also honoring them." He nodded, listening intently, expression unreadable yet undeniably engaged. "And you?" she asked suddenly, curiosity sparking in her own gaze. "Why did you ask?" He studied her for a moment, then answered honestly, without the usual shield of control. "Because I want to understand the people I care about. And you, what you do, how you think it, matters more than you realize." Sarah's breath caught. She wasn't sure what to say. For the first time he had spoken to her not as a boss or a distant figure of authority, but as someone genuinely interested. Her heart pounded, confusion swirling with a strange warmth. "Why do I feel this way around him?" she wondered. "Why does it feel like he's the only one who matters right now?" He watched her reaction silently, feeling the tension in his chest tighten. Every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion, it resonated with something deep inside him, something he had fought for years to ignore. For the first time in a long while, Bong Minjae realized some boundaries couldn't be enforced, and some hearts refused to be controlled. And Sarah Anderson, graceful, stubborn, impossibly alive, was already unraveling his. The pool reflected the moonlight like liquid silver. The quiet of the resort wrapped around them, a private world away from the rest of the retreat. Sarah and Bong Minjae sat on the edge of the pool, their feet skimming the water. The earlier tension had melted into conversation, slow, easy, and unexpectedly natural. She laughed at one of his dry, sarcastic observations about the corporate retreat activities. Had never expected her humor, light, unforced, and refreshing. "And that's why I rarely attend team-building exercises," he said with a faint smirk. "You're impossible," she replied, grinning. "But you're fun too, in a terrifying kind of way." He laughed softly, the sound rare and unguarded. "I suppose someone has to keep things interesting." The conversation drifted. He told her about his childhood, the years spent striving to maintain control, the pressures of building an empire, and the rare moments when he felt free. She shared stories to her parents, her move to Korea, living with her aunt, and the small victories that kept her going. She talked with a warmth and sincerity that made him listen with full attention, hanging on her every word. Time slipped by unnoticed. They laughed, debated lightly about trivial things, and even argued playfully about which Korean dish was superior. At one point, he leaned back slightly, letting the moonlight highlight the sharp lines of his face. He found himself watching her, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the subtle tilt of her head, the calm confidence beneath her soft exterior. Refreshing. The word formed unbidden in his mind. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, honest, lively, completely unaware of the storm she stirred inside him. And then, without warning, he moved closer. Before she could react, his lips met hers, sudden, decisive, and electric. The world seemed to stop. Sarah froze, eyes wide. Her chest raced. His hand hovered near hers, steadying, commanding, and yet impossibly gentle. "I've wanted to do this," he murmured against her lips, his voice low, serious, and filled with something raw, "since the first day I saw you." Her mind struggled to catch up, heart thundering with shock, disbelief, and an unfamiliar, intoxicating heat. He pulled back slightly, searching her face for any sign of anger or refusal. Instead he found confusion, sharp, fluttering, and entirely captivating. "I didn't know," she began, but he silenced her with a faint shake of his head. "No words. Not now," he said, deepening the kiss. He drank her in like he was thirsty. "Sarah, returned his kiss like she couldn't get enough of him too. Then he pulled back, kissed her forehead and hugged her tightly. The night air was still, and the pool shimmered quietly beneath the moon. They sat close, hearts racing from their shared kiss, yet neither moved away immediately. The world felt suspended, private, intimate, and charged with something neither of them could name. Bong Minjae broke the silence first, his voice low and urgent. "Sarah, I need to tell you the truth." She blinked, still processing the kiss, her chest tight, unsure if she was ready for words, or what they might mean. "I've been watching you," he continued, eyes fixed on hers, "since the day you arrived. And I couldn't stop noticing you. Not your work, not just your talent, but you. Everything about you." Sarah swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "I tried to suppress it," he said, voice tight. "I told myself it was impossible, that you were out of my league, and that I couldn't allow myself to feel anything." He hesitated, then leaned closer, his hand brushing against hers in a light, unspoken reassurance. "But I can't ignore it," he admitted. "Not when I see other men talking to you, making you smile. Can't stand it." I felt jealous, angry, restless, and I hated myself for feeling that way. I tried to distract myself. I brought a woman here this weekend, hoping to forget. But it didn't work. He paused, taking a deep breath. "I sent her away. I don't want anyone else. Only you. I want you, Sarah. I want to love you. And I want a chance to prove that, if you'll let me." Sarah's mind raced. Her chest felt tight, and her words stumbled in her throat. He was her boss. He held power over her in ways she couldn't ignore. Yet, everything he had just said, everything he had revealed, made her heart ache with something she barely understood. She began, then stopped. She shook her head slowly. "I need to think about this. I don't know what to do or say right now." Bong's expression softened. He nodded slowly, his usual sharp composure replaced by something rare, vulnerability. "That's fine," he said quietly. "Take your time. Tomorrow give me your answer. That's all I ask." Sarah swallowed, nodding, unsure if she could meet his gaze. "Good," he said simply, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in days. They sat together a moment longer, silence stretching comfortably between them. The moonlight reflected in the pool, gentle and calm, offering a quiet sense of promise. Neither of them spoke again that night, but both felt the unspoken weight of what had just passed. A confession, a challenge, and the first step toward something neither could deny. The first rays of the morning sun spilled across Sarah's room, warming the soft sheets and casting golden light over her thoughtful expression. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every word Bong Minjae had said the night before. His confession, his jealousy, his honesty, the way he had sent the other woman away for her. The raw vulnerability she had never expected from someone so powerful, so commanding. Her chest tightened. Her heart raced. She didn't know whether to feel excitement, fear, or guilt. She had never felt anything like this before, and he was her boss. Finally, unable to keep it bottled inside, she reached for her phone. "Aunt Mia?" she said as soon as the line connected. "Good morning, darling. How's the retreat? Did you sleep well?" Mia's voice was warm and light, but Sarah could hear the curiosity underneath. Sarah hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Aunt Mia, something happened last night. Need to tell someone." Mia's tone softened instantly. "Of course, Sarah. You can tell me anything." And so she told her. Every word. The kiss. His confession. How he had explained the jealousy he felt when other men interacted with her. How he had sent the woman he brought as a distraction away, asking for a chance to love her. "I don't know what to do," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's my boss. Don't even know if this is appropriate." Mia was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "I understand your hesitation, honey. But listen. Know your heart. You know how you feel when you're around him." Sarah nodded, though Mia couldn't see her. "If you feel the same way," Mia continued gently, "if your heart tells you there's something real here, then you shouldn't ignore it. Sometimes the right choice is the one that scares you the most. But you have to be honest with yourself first." Sarah exhaled slowly, her mind still spinning but her heart feeling slightly lighter. I think I do. Feel the same way. But I need time to be sure." "That's fair," Mia said warmly. "Take the day, think, feel, and then decide. Don't let fear rule your heart, Sarah. You deserve happiness, And if he's willing to be honest with you like that, maybe he deserves a chance too. Sarah smiled faintly, her mind swirling with the possibilities. Thank you, Aunt Mia. I think I needed to hear that. You'll know what to do, Mia said. Just follow your heart. Sarah hung up the phone and sat by the window, gazing out at the pool and the waves beyond. The retreat was bustling with activity below, but for the first time in days she felt a quiet clarity stirring inside her. She didn't know what her answer would be yet, but she knew one thing: Bong Min-jae had changed something in her heart that couldn't be ignored. The morning sun sparkled over the resort, the waves below catching the light and throwing it across the terrace. Employees moved busily between sessions, but Sarah's thoughts were elsewhere, quiet and focused. She had spent the night reflecting on everything Bong Min-jae had said, replaying the kiss, the confession, the raw honesty in his eyes. Her heart had ached, fluttered, and swelled all at once. She knew what she wanted, but the weight of the situation still made her pause. Finally, she took a deep breath and sought him out. He was leaning against the balcony railing of the executive suite, gazing over the ocean. The early morning breeze ruffled his hair slightly, and even at this distance, he radiated the calm command that always left people in awe. Min-jae, she called softly. He turned instantly, eyes sharp, alert, and she thought she was hopeful. Sarah, he said, his voice steady but low, carrying that familiar intensity that made her pulse quicken. I thought about what you said, she began, words careful and measured. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. About your feelings, and about mine. His expression didn't change, yet the small twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes softened slightly, told her everything she needed to know. He was listening, waiting, holding his breath. I want to give you a chance, she said finally, her voice trembling only slightly. But we have to be careful. You're my boss, and I don't want to do anything wrong. Bong's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, the first one reserved only for her. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. That's all I ask, he said softly, voice filled with something rare, relief, admiration, and restrained longing. Careful or not, I'll wait. And I'll make sure you're never hurt. Sarah felt warmth flood her chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had made a choice not reckless but brave, and it felt right. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch lingered just a moment too long, yet it was gentle, tender, respectful. I've wanted this since the first day I saw you, he murmured, his voice low and husky. Every moment since I've been trying not to lose control. But now I know I won't fight it anymore. Her cheeks flushed and she realized just how much she had wanted this too, had wanted him, even when she didn't understand why. I feel the same, she admitted softly, her gaze meeting his without hesitation. For a heartbeat, they simply stood there, the ocean breeze swirling around them, the world shrinking to just the two of them. And in that quiet, suspended moment, something unspoken passed between them, the start of a connection neither could deny, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected but both had been waiting for. Bong Min-jae, ever composed, ever in control, allowed himself a rare, small exhale. Good, he said almost to himself. Then, leaning closer, he whispered just for her, you won't regret this. Kissing her softly. Sarah's heart thudded. Somehow, in this man who was both impossible and utterly captivating, she already knew she hadn't made a mistake. Everything felt different. Bong Min-jae returned to the office with the same commanding presence, but to Sarah there was a noticeable change. He was gentler, more attentive. His instructions were clear, his tone calm, and whenever their paths crossed, his gaze carried warmth instead of distance. He never crossed boundaries, never made her uncomfortable. But in quiet moments, passing notes through assistants, brief check-ins, thoughtful gestures, Sarah felt his care. It unsettled her in the best way. A few days later, during a private conversation, he spoke carefully. I want to know you properly, he said. Where you come from, where you live, the people who matter to you. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. That weekend, he arrived at the modest apartment she shared with her aunt. He wore simple clothes, far from the sharp suits he was known for. Still, his presence filled the space effortlessly. Aunt Mia welcomed him with polite curiosity and warmth. Tea was served, conversation flowed easily, and Sarah watched in quiet surprise as Bong spoke respectfully, humbly, nothing like the Billionaire headlines described. After a while, he straightened slightly, his expression serious. Mrs. Mia, he said calmly, meeting her eyes. I care deeply for Sarah. I don't wish to rush or disrespect her in any way. I came today to ask for your permission to court her properly. The room fell silent. Sarah's heart raced. Mia studied him carefully, then smiled softly. Any man who asks instead of assumes already has my respect, she said. If Sarah agrees, then you have my blessing. Turned to Sarah, his gaze gentle, waiting. And in that moment, Sarah knew this wasn't a Bong fleeting attraction. This was intention. The months that followed were gentle and steady, like a love that knew it had nothing to prove. Bong Min-jae courted Sarah with patience and care. There were quiet dinners after work, late-night conversations filled with laughter, and moments of shared silence that spoke louder than words. He respected her space, her dreams, her pace. In return, Sarah gave him warmth, honesty, and a peace he never knew he was searching for. At work, he remained professional, protective without being possessive. Outside the office, he was attentive and deeply affectionate. Slowly, naturally, they became each other's safe place. And somewhere along the way, Bong knew she wasn't just the woman he loved. She was the woman he wanted for life. One quiet evening, a few months later, he took her to the place where everything had begun to change, the private resort where he had first confessed his feelings. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, the sky painted with soft shades of gold and pink. Sarah turned to him, smiling. Why did you bring me here? He took her hands, his usually composed expression filled with emotion she had come to recognize as love. Because this is where I stopped fighting my heart, he said softly, and where I realized I never want a life without you. Her breath caught. He lowered himself onto one knee. The world seemed to pause. Sarah Anderson, he said, voice steady yet filled with devotion. You came into my life when I wasn't looking, changed me without trying, and taught me how to love without fear. I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it. He opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple, elegant ring, timeless, just like his intentions. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. Her heart raced, overwhelmed by love, gratitude, and certainty. This was not sudden, not rushed. This was the natural next step of everything they had built together. Yes, she whispered, then louder, laughing through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly as if afraid to let go. The ring slid onto her finger, sealing a promise made with sincerity and love. As the waves crashed softly behind them, Bong Min-jae kissed her forehead and whispered, I will spend the rest of my life proving this choice right. And Sarah believed him. Because some love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with intention, patience, and two hearts brave enough to choose each other. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your support for this channel. See you in the next story.